Hello. Hey guys. Shriti, if you would, can you log back in as the admin user? Okay. Thank you. All right. Shriti has put up the meeting minutes in the chat, so she'll rejoin here in a minute and we'll get going. All right, some housekeeping while we wait for Shriti to come back. Does everyone have access to this doc? Everybody should be able to take notes as we go. If you do, toss your name in as an attendee. By the way, fair warning, for those who only toss in their first name, you forfeit your right to protect your last name. And Mert, we are just one meeting up on the January 6th. So if I end up making up a last name for you, that's the right that you've given up. So cool. All right, Shriti, whenever you're ready for us.
All right, welcome to the Meshery call, everybody. This is the one place where we discuss everything related to the Meshery project, whether it be any of the surrounding projects that have or are currently dependent on Meshery or directly related to the project. If you're new on the call, please take a minute to introduce yourself. Make sure that you can access the meeting minutes. A link is provided in the chat. If you can't, please do speak up. You should be able to access it if you have been onboarded as a community member. Post that, we have a pretty good agenda today, so we can start. But before we do, are there any newcomers on the call except Mert? All right, Mert, the stage is yours. Please introduce yourself. All
Cool.
right, if your audio is not working.
Good deal. So, hey, Shriti, I'm not sure. Hey, Mert, welcome to the call.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yep, the audio is good. Nice to have you. You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi.
Yeah, good.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Nice to have you here. Thanks for joining. We like to make everyone feel uncomfortable and introduce themselves just so everybody can get familiar. Are you, whereabouts are you coming from physically?
Turkey. I'm from Turkey, Istanbul.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, you might be about 7 hours ahead of me. I suspect I'm in Texas. So I'm still on my, this is like my first cup and a half, I guess. So it's my second cup. Yeah. Obviously I need more cups to be able to count cups. Anyway.
8 hours.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, thanks for jumping in. It's nice to have you here. You're asking the right questions. You're digging in. That's good. Thanks for tossing in a topic as well. We'll be sure to get to the documentation request. That's great. Anirudh, you can go ahead and put your, we're going to put your topic first since we've gone round this. So thanks a bunch for being here, Mert. But Anirudh, let me set the stage for some of the things that we'd like to try to do, which is be collaborative, share on our designs, engage people early in our thought process so people can collaborate on the designs. Anirudh is trying to work through a design on mesheryctl system channel around context. So we've recently described and defined a new construct in mesheryctl. It's called context. And I'll take this since Anirudh would rather not. This is mesheryctl system context. All right, all of us have used mesheryctl for the most part, I suspect. I'm going to go ahead and share my terminal to get people familiar with it. In case you haven't had. Now, of the terminal session, oh, okay, I'm not sure which terminal session I was sharing. All right, so let's talk about this topic of context. Everybody used kubectl at one point, probably.
Yeah.
And I think Docker has this as well, the Docker CLI. And it's high time that the mesheryctl, the Meshery CLI has it as well. And so this has been being created. When you run mesheryctl, to date, it will make the assumption that you want to run Meshery locally on your system in a Docker container. And that's not always the case. A lot of times people want to run Meshery in Kubernetes, or they want to run remote Meshery running in Docker somewhere else. And this CLI, mesheryctl, it needs to be configurable. It needs to be able to point to that environment. And so we need to be able to describe contexts or create contexts that describe Meshery deployments. There are a whole set of commands under mesheryctl system. mesheryctl system commands control the life cycle of Meshery itself. So when we run a mesheryctl system, what we're told is one, that hey, that command by itself won't get us where we need to go, and actually we're missing a description. We give usage, but we don't have a description of what the command is, which might be kind of nice. But if we run a help, we'll go ahead and we'll get a description. So it manages the state and configuration of the Meshery server, the adapters, and as well as the configuration of the client and how the client behaves. So these system commands start Meshery, they stop Meshery, restart it, update certain components of Meshery, and the like. So one of the, I guess the proper term is subcommand. I'm not sure. One of the commands coming forth has to do with context. And I'm running the stable version of mesheryctl right now, so we don't necessarily see context, but let me switch over and use an edge version. So here I've just got an edge version of, latest version, an edge version of mesheryctl running. So I'll do a mesheryctl system -h. And within here, we've got this new construct, context. It's to configure your Meshery deployments, which is what I was just saying. So we take a look at this. If we just run context itself, it will let us know what our current context is. I've created a test context. Well, what does that mean? I'm hoping that this, I don't remember. Nope. mesheryctl context view. View tells me my current context, but it doesn't tell me anything about my current context. Well, what is configured in my current context? I don't know. I can't tell from mesheryctl. Can someone take a note on that in the meeting minutes that this is good, but we should probably go ahead and give the user print out the full config?
Do you mean more interactive?
Yeah, not interactive as much as, yeah, you could describe it as that, more informative.
Yes, I mean that, yes.
Oh, nice. And so this is, so for now, if you want to see what that looks like, and by you, I don't mean you, Mert, but rather just everybody. Actually, Mert, this is for everybody in case you thought I was picking on you this whole time. But here under Meshery has an application folder. And under that application folder, in the user's home folder, there's a new file called config.yaml. And it's pretty simple in nature. And this is actually what we would be looking for to come out of context view, which is, this is informative to tell you your current context. It would be probably appropriate to go ahead and give people the full printout of what's in this configuration file. So when we look inside the configuration file, it's information about context, information about Meshery deployments. So in this file, there are two contexts. There's a local one and a test. The local one will most often be in an individual's environment because it's kind of the default. It's sort of the way that Meshery assumes that it's going to run, which would be it assumes it's going to run with all of its adapters, run locally, probably run on Docker as a platform. It will look to a certain location for the auth token to speak to Meshery server. And that token will be, this is interesting. This Anirudh, I don't know if this is accurate. The structure here, if we give this a token a name, the name of the token here is called default, okay? And then the location though is up here, which looks more like a global location for all tokens. And so I know that we haven't really gotten into manipulating the tokens and doing a lot there, but just as we look at the default template for config.yaml, probably this is an attribute of name. And actually, I think the part of the confusion here is that token itself is independent. So we'll have every context, will have a token, and it will refer to that token by name. The tokens themselves and what attributes the default token has, like what its location is and maybe other things, that would be a separate stanza, like a separate object. So there would be in this file, there will be contexts, and then there will be tokens as two like top level objects. Can someone capture that? Anirudh, does that make sense?
Yeah, actually we did have a discussion on this. You said that we would keep this as the finishing touches for context. So once we are done basically contextualizing the entire Meshery CTL, then we'll come back to tokens, because only then we would be able to test tokens completely, because almost many commands that take in tokens are not how do you say contextualized right now.
Sure. And right now we're not using, this is just sort of text that we're not using, right?
It's just there, but you're not making use, like you're not using it.
Cool. So if you shift this back, if you outdent this, so to speak.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, cool. I mean, that technically what I said is inaccurate. Like you'll leave this here, it will have a name, but then you'll create another, token reference, which will have a nice, but it won't actually work. It'll just be sort of in preparation for. Cool. So that's a bit about where Anirudh has been focused here recently. Anirudh, I know you're taking this, like the next sort of phase that you're looking at is building in support for different platforms. And you're kind of, now that contexts are being formed, you're looking at making all of the system commands context aware. Anything that I didn't cover that maybe you want to speak to, work on channel or other?
Yeah, so currently I'm not entirely focusing on platform. The platform part would come later on. For now, I'm just improving the experience for Docker, where you could actually uh, modify the version uh, of Meshery that's being used in the Docker compose file. Each context would have their own compose files, just so everything stays as accurate as possible. And um, so we just like I'm focusing now on improving the Docker experience. Later on, I'll shift towards adding Podman and Kubernetes after doing respective studies into how I can get those done. And I guess that's more on how I'll be proceeding with mesheryctl.
So, anybody have any thoughts or feedback kind of on the work that's going on here? There's a design doc, there's kind of two of them where you can digest more of this. So we'll put links to those in the meeting minutes, and then I will pause again to ask if anyone has any feedback.
Sorry, I need to ask a question. Um, do we have a parameter like dash dash context uh, to read more information about commands or execute commands?
Anirudh, do you want to take that?
I didn't get the question.
Yeah, so hey, is there help for an additional context for the commands?
You already have help from the Cobra CLI, right? So basically, you get to know what each command does and how they work, like how whichever commands that you pass in.
Because there should be more attractive or more detailed interface within the source code for network. Like there's an endpoint here, there's an endpoint here. It's I see there localhost 9081, but it can be lots of endpoints. So maybe we can report that endpoint string expression with lots of networks. I don't know how it works, but I feel that
Mm,
when we say command dash dash endpoint dash dash um, endpoint, sorry, dash dash context dash dash endpoint, there should be uh, an accessible interface for any kind of interface, IP address or cluster.
Nice. So, Mert, are you referring to, like in the example that you're using, are you talking about mesheryctl perf as an example?
Yes,
Okay. Oh, nice. Yeah, let's take a look at that.
I, I will write the command example uh, first on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you want to share your screen? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, I will share my screen, maybe, but now I don't have the Meshery. I couldn't install yet because I'm new to community. But I will write what I dream.
Just real briefly.
Yes, a short command.
Yeah, no, sorry. Actually, just a brief separate note, Mert, for like Sudan, maybe, is the mesheryctl perf command. It's requiring that Docker be enabled, and that's not a prerequisite for running mesheryctl perf. So we need to open an issue. That might be something that you'd like to take
That's
on.
already done.
Oh, it's done. Okay. All right.
Like go after maybe this meeting, it would be great if you could review the PR. And later on, when we add multiple, more platforms to the system start, even on that part, I'm adding more stuff. So basically, I'm also removing Docker requirement from system start, and that would actually be a dynamic requirement. So if you're using Docker, you need Docker Compose. If you're using Kubernetes, you need kubectl and all those stuff.
Nice. Okay, that makes sense. All right. So Mert, you were going to give feedback on mesheryctl perf. I think your feedback is well, one, probably good, but two, might end up being a feature feature enhancement. It might be that you're thinking of mesheryctl perf slightly differently than how it's been designed today, but maybe a good feature request. So let me explain what I mean, which is that mesheryctl perf is, so mesheryctl is a client to Meshery's server REST API. So Meshery server, when you run a performance test in Meshery server, it lets you, right now,
Yes, I see.
it lets you test one endpoint at a time. Like it lets you generate load against a single endpoint. In the future, in the not too distant future, we will, Meshery will let people test multiple endpoints at the same time. And it's probably at that point in time, like, hey, the mesheryctl perf needs to be augmented to allow someone to say, I've got 5 endpoints, why don't you hammer on all 5 of these? And it might be the case, this is slightly to the left or to the right or thought, like slightly out of scope of where Meshery is aimed at. But if you were to give it a subnet, a CIDR, an IP address block, whatever you want to call it, a network, and sort of do a kind of like you do a ping sweep, but do like a load generation against an entire cluster. That is not exactly that might be something for us to do. Not exactly it might be something for us to do. It's not quite the tool that, like that type of network discovery isn't exactly where we'd been focused. We'd been focused on the fact that Meshery is managing workloads, endpoints that are running on service meshes. You could have any number of them. You could have, any number of subnets, any number of services running inside those networks. And you might want to generate load against a bunch of them at one time. And Meshery will facilitate for that. But in many respects, it would know about what those are up front. Or if it doesn't, you can go ahead and just tell it like, here's this name, this name, this name, or this IP, this IP, this IP. It expects, what would happen is if you gave it a range, it's likely to try to hammer on some IP addresses. It would assume port 80. You could tell it what port, but if you're going to give it a whole range, then you're going to give it probably just one port for the whole range. If you're going to try to hit a particular endpoint, then it would be the same endpoint for the whole range. And you'd probably end up with a number of performance results that come back that are empty, or that come back with a bunch of errors because there was no endpoint to actually hit. So it's not a port scan type utility or a ping sweep type utility in that respect. Although it does do that type of behavior programmatically with Kubernetes, it does service discovery with Kubernetes and does discovery in that way. That discovery component is called mesh sync.
Okay, I understood it better.
Oh, yeah, say it again.
I understood it better.
Oh, okay. Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So just to tie that off, I think this is a great conversation probably for everyone. It's a good thing for us collectively, you and the rest of us to think about is like Meshery is a fairly fast moving project and we want to make it robust and feature rich. And so thinking aloud and talking aloud about what some of those upcoming features are is a highly appropriate thing to do. If we reflect on to do that, as you familiarize and as everyone else does as well, one of Meshery's pieces of functionality is to do a performance test. So today you'd come in here, you'd give it the MERT test, which is probably a pretty tough one. But anyway, bad joke. But you give it a name. In this case, I have open service mesh provisioned in my environment. And so Meshery just auto discovers that, it knows about that. And so even though you can choose from different meshes to test against, I don't have any of these provisioned in my environment, but I do have open service mesh provisioned. Meshery knows about that. At some point, it will be, it already discovers any applications or workloads that I'm running on top of open service mesh. It's just not taking that next step of making it convenient by listing out those discovered services here. As a matter of fact, there were two contributors, Kinal and Maxim, who were going to do that. Treaty, you mind following up with those two on? They have an open issue that they were collaborating on, and I think they might have gotten lost over the holiday.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, we definitely want to enhance the experience because Utkarsh and others can tell you, hey, we know about what those services are. Why don't we just have a drop-down list to show you the endpoints, to show you what the name of your apps are? And since we don't right now, you'd say, well, my app is running at an IP address or local host or whatever domain name, whatever it is, on this port at hello world or whatever the endpoint is. Right now, Meshery only supports generating HTTP load, but it's planned and very somewhat simple for us to go support generating gRPC based load, UDP and TCP based load. We just haven't really exposed that capability in the UI yet. So Mert, to your point, right now, Meshery just wants to hammer on one endpoint, but in the near future, the intention is for it to you to be able to specify almost any number of endpoints. I guess we haven't talked about like how many that would be, but more than one. More than that, we're also, instead of just having Meshery run a single instance of a load generator, that we would, Meshery would facilitate deploying multiple instances of this particular load generator. And that way it can get a very high fidelity view of what it looks like when you inundate your system.
Okay.
So good.
Okay.
So Mert, hopefully that helps with like, so
Yes. Yes.
Nice. So this is so Meshery CTL is a client. So I should say like it can do, or hopefully at some point it can do everything that the UI can do, but not more or not yet. And actually just yet, it doesn't quite do or expose everything that the UI does. But folks like Anirudh and others are trying to get it there. Awesome. Nice. Okay. Anybody have any thoughts or feedback, comments on? And Mert, as you're thinking on that use case of sort of a subnet wide test, if Meshery is discovering your existing services running in your Kubernetes cluster, or if it lets you specify really like any number of non-Kubernetes endpoints. You know, whatever those may be. It can be on the it can be running on a mesh, running off of a service mesh, running outside of Kubernetes. While it wouldn't let you sweep the subnet, it would let you specify any number of endpoints in a subnet or across different subnets. Does that meet the use case that you're looking for?
Some kind of, yes.
Gets you closer. Okay. Cool. Okay. Anybody else have comments on questions, thoughts on the work that's being done here? Maybe Sudan, since you're on, I know we're kind of going out of order. I apologize. I just, for continuity of thought, Sudan, do you want to talk about the work that you've been doing on Meshery CTL system channel?
Am I audible?
Not really.
Okay, if it's clear.
It's clear, just really low volume. Unless it's me.
I don't know. Maybe my mic. I'm really sorry. So I'll share my screen. So far, like I have been working on the system, Meshery CTL system channel, where we can use getting the advantage of system context. Currently, each context doesn't have a channel we can subscribe. So I'm working on that to switch between edge and stable. And just to show it's not complete yet, just to show like giving the command system Meshery CTL system channel, it displays the channel subscription. Currently it's stable. Default it's stable when contexts are created. So we can change it to edge to say, and mostly it gets configured. Yeah, it changes the alterations are done in config file where only for specific only to the current context. But I having some issues when like changing this context. It also alters the Meshery Docker Compose file. So I having like when a context is deleted to say delete localhost, it doesn't sync like to the it still works on the Docker Compose file just been like doesn't get updated to use the stable or the default value even after the current context is been deleted. Like, is it clear? I don't know whether it's clear.
Yeah. Let's walk through a couple. Yeah, it's well, it's amazingly somewhat straightforward work, these commands, and they are also amazingly riddled with like all these gotchas. And so this might be one of them. Anirudh had worked on that Meshery CTL system context delete. Now, when you put localhost there, was that it expects the name of a context? Okay, and so it did delete localhost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, but the issue is like, unto your understanding, you have executed a command that was to subscribe you to the edge channel when you did the -s to set to edge. And so in your Docker, I might be missing what you just said, but in your Docker Compose, it is set to edge latest. So that's good for the moment.
But when we delete the current context to say localhost, it should just get like shift to the next context available when
Oh
each
yeah,
one is deleted.
yeah. So you're
Currently,
saying that like your current context is a null value, and so
yeah.
smells like a bug to me.
Yeah, and also I was thinking like current context view only just says that what is being set. If we can have a flag to say all to show what are all the context being configured and
Yeah, yeah,
not showing only the current context.
this may, for my part, this may be one of the first times where it's fairly, and Udesha is, and thank goodness that he's on because he's familiar with this. Udesha has tried to enhance the mesheryctl command line experience to be what Mert had called a bit more interactive. And this is probably, and that's a good step forward. But when we step forward to like change the way that people are interacting with mesheryctl, mesheryctl is a client of the Meshery server REST API, which that's the third time I've said it on this call. Just like Meshery UI, the UI is a client of the Meshery server REST API. So actually, Meshery UI and mesheryctl, they're both clients. They're both user experiences. So if we bring a new user experience, like a new interactive way of interfacing with mesheryctl, good, sounds like a good step forward. Although the user experience has to be consistent, else the user experience rating goes down. This is, anyway, I bring it up because this is one of the small ways to begin to introduce interactivity when it's not always entirely clear. Like when you delete a context, like, hey, you might have like 4 other contexts in there. You had 5 to start with, you delete one, and then what? We're just supposed to guess like which one to set the current context to. Gosh, I hope that was the right one. And maybe if we chose the context prod, and we didn't really tell you that, we just chose it and you weren't paying attention and you went to do something, we might screw up prod. Like, this is probably the right point in time where it's like, hey, we don't really know what your needs are. When you do a mesheryctl system context delete, as part of that deletion, like, hey, we'll execute the deletion, but probably the next step there would be, here's the other 4. Which one would you like for it to be? And so Udesha, like actually seeking you out because some of your help here might be really advantageous to asking the user that question. That circumvents issues like, oops, error context not set. Udesha, does that make sense?
Hello. Yeah, that does make sense. And like that would be actually a logical step forward in that one. And a very simple way to do it would be like listing the options and asking to like listing the option of contexts, which, as you said, said like 4 contexts are present and choose any one of them. And you could either put in the number or you can use the interactive user experience which we had, something like that prompt UI which can be used here. So that's one improvement which can be done, I think.
I think so. You have my vote. Anybody else want to opine on that? Yeah, Udesha, please do. And that way we can begin to, this is a good area to begin to introduce interactivity. It's an appropriate place where we want to ask somebody the question because we're not really sure what to do. There will be the use case where someone deleted the last available context. And I think Anirudh is already captured for that case. But as you step through it, you'll see. Now, the thing that Anirudh, and I keep calling out his name because he's been having to focus on this system context. It's been so much needed for a long time. Very excellent to see it coming through. It's also disruptive. And that's just the nature of the beast of like, it's disruptive to the rest of the system commands. So Sudan, one of the things that you were just highlighting is, well, when I run system channel set subscribe to edge, the command today goes out and it modifies the Docker file, the Docker compose file that's there. But as we make all of these system commands context aware, okay, it's going to modify the Docker file for the current context. Okay, that's appropriate. Good. Now, but the context, as we're building that in, part of the attribute of a context is whether or not the platform is Docker. So whether or not to modify Docker compose, or the platform is Kubernetes, and whether or not to modify some manifest files. And so there's a bunch of refactoring that needs to be done across the system commands to really infuse context across the board. So I'm glad that there's a number of people here who have gotten their hands dirty with mesheryctl, because I think there's a lot of things, a lot of ground to cover. Last statement, thing that I'll say real quick is, yep, go ahead. Something that I'll say real quick is that we were having a discussion just yesterday or the day before, just yesterday, about how to manipulate that YAML. Today we're manipulating YAML and Docker compose file. And the thing is as you go, we have a single Docker compose file today. Okay, but if you have multiple contexts, then would you have one Docker compose file per context, or one Kubernetes set of manifests per context? Maybe. Or is that something intrinsic to mesheryctl that it's going to figure out your config and then generate the compose file sort of based on your config? Maybe. And anyway, that's what Anirudh was, there's a link to that design spec in the meeting minutes. So go weigh in on that. I was going to update that for Anirudh and Abhishek, who are part of this conversation. Guys, the Docker compose, that binary, it will let you provide a combination of YAML files. So Docker compose up with the name of the compose file that you want, plus the name of another compose file, plus the name of another compose file, which has the effect of, if you're familiar with Kubernetes, the Kubernetes customize, it has the effect of merging those compose files with the with the subsequent compose files that you reference, taking precedence so that you can do for this exact use case for environment and sort of context support.
And by the and one more suggestion, I don't know how it goes. Like currently we are only manipulating YAML file. If we use something like Viper, it supports all the file formats. I think it's used text, but when it comes to channel, it uses a YAML dependency to pass the YAML file. If we can have it across the system CTL, mesheryctl files, it will be great.
I agree with him. That's a better way to sort of templatize.
Yeah, I just found it out in the context files implementation.
Sounds like you've got all of the support. That's a great suggestion. Totally, we should do it. Let's do it. Not we should do it. Let's do it. Just as we move off of this topic, did everyone understand what was being said here? Specifically, Abhishek and Anirudh.
Yeah, that's the better way to do it. I'm with it.
No, actually, I didn't hear most of it.
Okay. Here, look at this this statement right here, and then come back if it doesn't make sense.
So
But in actually, so I'm
no,
gonna,
there's like
I'm gonna move on. It should be obvious. Like go try this command out and go see it. You'll pick it up. And I'm moving on just because I don't want to be rude to Rodolfo. We sort of skipped over, I think, the first topic. We only have 15 minutes left. So Rodolfo, do you want to take this topic? Who's there?
Are tests or overall or a specific functionality?
I'm not sure. Do you know, Shriti, do you know who put this as a topic?
You did a couple of
Did I?
meetings ago.
Oh, okay. So refreshing my memory. All right. So, okay. So for the console adapter, Michael has used bats as the mechanics to do integration testing with the console adapter. And we considered like, hey, that looks pretty good. You can manually invoke that today. We should probably be invoking that as part of the workflow when the adapter is built or released. And Rodolfo, you had done some work around provisioning of a Kubernetes environment through GitHub Actions. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is for implementing testing of bats in Meshery console, right?
Yeah, and then more broadly, understanding what we can do with a temporary Kubernetes environment. Like yes as a step one, and then sort of as a step one, like helps do integration testing with across all the adapters. But sort of a step two is like, well, now if we can provision a Kubernetes environment as well, there are other things beyond adapters that we might want to test. And so I think it was.
Yeah, actually in Meshery, I created a kind cluster with Kubernetes in Docker. So in Meshery, we have already the Kubernetes environment, but I need to do the same in Meshery-console. So right now, I am testing that adapter, Meshery console, in the Meshery project, but I am having problems with the Docker containers. But I think I can proceed with the Meshery console testing in order to have that Kubernetes environment that you mentioned.
Okay, and so yeah, refresh my memory. The test that you were doing when you were creating kind, it was to do what? Or like what set of functionality was being tested there?
Yeah, I was testing the settings in Meshery in order to discover the cluster and be connected with Meshery in order to deploy an adapter.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Any thoughts from anyone about the full extent to which we would do integration testing in a workflow? Like we may not want to do full integration testing every time that a PR is merged, or maybe we do. We definitely want to do integration testing before a release. We don't want to have a lot of technical debt, so to speak, or regression issues latent within the master branch, all leading up to a release. And then we're trying to do integration tests at the end and then figuring out like, there's a bunch of refactoring before we do a release. We don't want to make releases a big event, more than they have to be. Is there a balance to be struck, do you think? Does anybody have an opinion? No one has it. No one.
Okay. We can start bats, as in it can be the first step to do the integration testing.
First step before release, or first step on every PR?
before release.
Before release. There's a +1 here. And so the more frequently we do a release, the less regression issues that we would think that we would have. If we do a release once a month, we might find some regression issues as we go to do that full integration testing. Should integration testing not be driven, maybe an intermediary approach here is like, there should be nightly regression testing that runs independent of any PR. Maybe that's a good intermediary step so that we're not slowing down PRs and we're not running full sets of integration tests every time that a merge is done. What about that?
Yeah. So that's so because it's a overkill, I didn't want it to be for every PR, but for every PR that needs to be some sort of a code coverage stuff, which can be done in Golang, which is specific, like basically for Golang, it is we can write unit tests or enforce unit tests. So that can be done like that. That is an easier way to do for every PR, but integration test would be like an overkill.
Okay. So yeah, if we look at Rodolfo, and I'm going to try to capture the essence of what Abhishek is describing, which is, I think it's sort of like if you look at the events that trigger a given workflow. So sometimes the event is like on pull request. Another event is like on merge to master. Another is just maybe time-based nightly, and another is on release. And I think, here's what it sounds like we're coming up, we're proposing right now is that potentially, now there's full regression testing of Meshery itself, sort of using, pulling in the different adapters. There's regression testing of, integration test. I keep saying regression testing, I'm sorry, integration testing of each of the adapters themselves. So if I'm capturing this right, we're saying in terms of on every PR, it's sort of overkill to run a full set of integration tests on every PR. However, unit tests are highly appropriate and necessary. Now, right now, Rodolfo, the Cypress UI, sort of, the integration tests that we're doing through leveraging Cypress UI, those fall under the category of integration tests. Right now, we are running those on, well, I don't know if it's every commit, every push, or every merge.
It does on every push.
Okay. So, and which maybe there's different genres of integration tests that are. So by the way, the on every push, that the work that you've done with kind, are we spinning up kind at every push?
Yeah, on every push, we create a kind cluster and then delete it.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. So, all right. Maybe we won't get all of this figured out on this call, but Rodolfo, Rodolfo, we used to run a weekly continuous integration call, where where that was the focus of the meeting. And clearly we use workflows a lot. We use a lot of actions. There's a lot to do within there. Sudan had recently pointed out that like, hey, if you didn't know that there's a release event, you can trigger on release, which for my part, I think is kind of embarrassing because it's like, I think we should have been using that. So clearly there's work to be done, particularly in the more mature Meshery gets, and Meshery is about to reach its, v0.5 release. The more effort put into CI, the earlier, the more that it just pays off. So one, I'm wondering if we shouldn't have maybe reinstate that meeting maybe once every 2 weeks or something, maybe.
Yeah, sounds good.
And we would be looking for someone or maybe a couple of individuals to sort of lead that charge. And
Sure.
so something to think about. And Sudan actually is working on, well, Sudan, if you have a link to the Meshery cloud, what do you call it? The Meshery cloud release strategy. These are the kinds of things that we need in a full doc, because to really grok it and understand what's happening and when. So there are 2 docs on the subject. Sudan, if you have that, you could drop it in here, and I'll drop in the other one. And then Shriti, it sounds like we might have our next victim, Rodolfo, and the CI meeting.
Yeah, for me it's okay.
Nice. I've been talking a lot this meeting. We've got a few minutes left. What did we miss? Who else has comments and things? Oh, Udesha, we've got these.
That would be. I actually just wanted to know how exactly are we passing the Meshery adapter, like those issue adapters and all that. How exactly are we passing the versions, or like what will be the feasible way?
So Michael put in a couple of good proposals.
Like using the proto and for basically the question was what if the version so far he has specified is the tag and commit SHA, like a combination of those. So where exactly do I put it? Like there is this the adapter toolkit, and then the configurations are specifically used in like he said that every adapter has its own configuration now, and it's not inherited from the adapter toolkit. So what exactly should be done?
Yeah. Abhishek, do you know so Meshkit is being used Meshkit is being used by the Meshery adapter library. Meshkit is also soon to be used in Meshery server. Meshkit is used in Meshery operator and MeshSync as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's good.
And so I think the question that Udesha is getting to is, as we understand that Meshery is comprised of any number of components. Some deployments will have more components, some will have less, but every component is versioned independently. They're released independently and versioned independently. And as a user goes to, so as you have created this mock-up, which I think illustrates the point that Meshery as a system overall will be reporting on its individual component versions. So Meshery will be running an operator, it'll be running MeshSync, it'll be running some NATs, and it'll report on those versions. Knowing that that's something of a universal need, not just for adapters, this issue to report on versions, should we make this a bit more generic and change this from adapter to component and push this up to Meshkit?
Okay, so we did have a discussion on this, I believe, and it took us to the open application model.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, basically it's been dealt with protobuffs, but today we do have it on Meshkit. Basically, there is a folder called protobuf in which we've got some generic interfaces which would return status and information. Like info endpoint will give you the version and name of the server and everything, and the status would give you the health of that particular server. So we do have these two for now, which has been used in Mesh Sync, I guess. Yeah, Mesh Sync or Operator, either of them. Yeah, so that's basically the first step that we've taken. But every time we had this conversation, it ended up with OAM.
Sure. But in the meantime, there have been small steps taken with two endpoints. So basically that are already satisfying this requirement. So the info endpoint in Meshkit satisfies this requirement. And so this is...
We can port it to that. So basically we can make changes in that library to sort of import those protos to, like, we can use them is what I mean.
Is that the MeshOps proto, or is that...
No, it's a separate one. I can...
Okay.
Are you on the repo? I can point it to you. If...
Okay. Yeah, and so to clarify on Udesh's question, what's the direction that should be taken for this?
We can integrate that protocol, the existing one that is in Meshkit, to solve this purpose.
Udesh, does that help?
So like, I have one question. Like, okay, so the Meshery issue adapter, which is being built, it has its own built-in release. So will it not interrupt that? Like, is the Meshkit file
so,
sync?
so the version and everything is going to be coming from your config. So the protobuf will have only the platform or the methods defined, and the values will be coming from the config of each and every adapter. So it shouldn't matter. I have put a link on the Zoom chat. You can basically check it out in there. So we've got protobufs for errors and info and health check, as in this case.
Okay, with me. This helps.
Got it. Okay.
Good deal. Well, that's probably about a wrap. I think Shriti Mert has pointed out a documentation bug, and so Mert's going to get his hands dirty. I think that's fantastic.
That's great. I'll open an issue for that. Or Mert, do you want to do that instead?
Yep. Yeah, he volunteered in the chat. Yeah, he volunteered in the chat. So yeah.
Oh, all right. All right. I'll catch up with you on Slack. Thank you for coming on, everybody. Same time next week.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you. Bye.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Guys.
Take care.